I need to thank our sponsors who came on relatively short notice today. The University of Portland is providing some of the meals, technology, rooms, that sort of thing. Portland Public Schools is helping out with meals and technology and presenters. And OATC put together the website to support the conference with registration and those things. We also have Aver Information Incorporated, which is a developer and manufacturer of document cameras, interactive pens, several other systems, if you could stop by to see them. Cisco and Mountain States provide unified communication solutions. Lightspeed Technologies specializes in infrared classroom audio technology. Saxton Bradley supplies technology, high-quality furniture, and equipment to K-20 learning environments and commercial businesses. Smart Technologies is a provider of interactive whiteboards and other integrated products. In our last session today, which is back here with Ken Shelton, we'll have a drawing for an iPad 2, and also Smart Technologies has donated a Slate tablet. So if you can be with us at 3 o'clock right here, we'll do that drawing. So I'm thrilled to welcome my colleague, Dr. Jason Ohler, here today. Jason's first book was Taming the Beast, Choice and Control in the Electronic Jungle. It's a great book, and it talks about, asks great questions about the role of technology in our lives, not just education, but all the technology that we're confronted with on a daily basis. It's a great book. It came out a while ago, but it's still a great way to think about what kind of questions do we need to ask when we're confronted with new technologies. Digital Storytelling in the Classroom, New Media Pathways. It's a book that I use with my students here. I teach a children's literature course, and we do digital storytelling. There's some great pieces on media production, thinking about story, and new media narratives. So that was his second book. His new book is Digital Community, Digital Citizen, and he'll be getting at some of the themes from that book this morning. And then his new book is Learning from Leonardo, Inspiration and Innovation, and that's Leonardo da Vinci, not Leonardo DiCaprio. We're really excited. He's just finishing up that book now, should be out soon. Jason's published widely in newspapers, magazines, journals, Education Leadership, Phi Delta Kappan, Tech Trends. He's been a radio commentator on Clear Channel and CBS on issues of technology and society. A few of his recent projects include Reimagineering Catholic Schools in Alberta. I'll be working with them over time. He has upcoming keynotes in Indianapolis, Prague, Beijing, Munich, so we're lucky to have him in Portland. In addition to being a futurist, a digital humanist, and a cyber researcher, he's spent 30 years working directly with students and teachers in classrooms, helping them to create new media and to understand the impact of technology in their lives. So without further ado, my good friend, Jason Ohler.
Scott, it's tradition. Okay. Alrighty. One slight tech adjustment here. Let me turn off iTunes. By the way, you've been listening to original music. Unless you didn't like it, then Scott wrote it. Okay, there we go. Okay. We have a little bit of ring on that. Can you hear that? Okay, excellent. I want to thank a number of people. The Portland School District, OATC, for making this all happen. And I want to thank Scott. As we knew him at the University of Alaska, we knew him as the man with too many good ideas. Sort of like Mozart and Amadeus, too many notes. But this is obviously one of his too many good ideas. And congratulations to him for pulling this all together. And I want to thank Dan, who is the tech man. And if you're a teacher, be nice to your techies. They stand in between you and success, and hopefully you get one like Dan who's very easy to deal with. And the guy makes his own guitars and has a master's degree in classical guitar, and that makes him probably cooler than most people I know. So off we go here. New media, new students, new literacies, new citizens. A couple of things. Feel free to blog, Twitter, do whatever it is that you like to do. I take it as a personal challenge to be so interesting. Either you can't help yourself or you don't want to. Either of those works for me. If you're interested in keeping up on educational technology and things out there that you really should know about, I write for the Committed Sardine blog, and there are about 10 of us that consider ourselves cultural correspondents. We go out there, we find stuff, we park it there, we comment on it, and we invite you to comment on it, and we have many thousands of subscribers, and we do as good a job as anybody that I've ever seen. If you are interested in what I have to say today, you can download it right there on my website. As you can see, I own the version of Photoshop with the biceps option. It's so much easier than actually exercising. Ladies and gentlemen, that is my second grade class. That is my second grade class. Where's Jason? Sucking up to the teacher at a young age. Early training for getting a PhD. There we are. There she is. Her name is Miss Phelps. Does she not look like a Miss Phelps? This is that period in American history where all second grade teachers look perpetually 65. She does not disappoint in that regard. In the sweltering heat of a Buffalo summer, she would still wear wool skirts halfway down her calf. And the reason I put her up there is because I absolutely adored her. I couldn't wait to get to school. She was just one of those magical teachers with that glint in her eye that invited you into her classroom every day. Long before Howard Gardner came along, she understood that we all learned and expressed ourselves in different ways, and she was using music and dance and big fat crayons. I mean, she was just really going for it, and she was absolutely successful at it. I mean, she was an incredibly effective teacher. She was a great pedagogist. She was always looking for that door to open for each individual student. And for me, it was storytelling. And I will never forget, we were studying dinosaurs. I could not remember the names of dinosaurs for some reason. And she came along and she said, well, Jason, you like to tell stories, so why don't you name them and tell stories about them? And forever after, they became Stegosaurus Stan and Tyrannosaurus Tom. Does storytelling work in education? Well, that's 50 years ago, I think so. God bless Miss Phelps. She was just one of those magical teachers that absolutely changed my life because she opened a door for me. And while I'm thanking teachers, I want to thank my 10th grade music teacher. That's him right there. His name is John Hasselback. I'm still friends with him. That's me over on the right there. Now, this is that period in cultural history, really global history when you think about it, called Beatlemania. Now, for those of you who are not members of AARP, you will need to go to YouTube or find an old person and ask them about Beatlemania. But it was really a rather amazing event. It was the first, maybe Elvis was the first, but the Beatles were to me, the first that took new music and hype and a global media industry and sort of put it all together. And me and all my friends, this is 10th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, me and all my friends were watching these four guys play their hearts out, and in the audience are women screaming and fainting. And we looked at that and we said, you know, music looks like a good career. And off we went, bound and determined not to let our lack of talent stop us. And yet I had some talent, I still have it, and I have it much more in my ear than I have it in my fingers. I can hear music better than I can play music. I have that kind of musical intelligence that Howard Gardner talks about. So I went to Mr. Hasselback, this is 10th grade, and I said, Mr. Hasselback, I am desperate to take your music theory course. But it says very clearly in the prerequisites, you must be able to read music. I could not read music. I could read music the way you can all read music. Every good boy deserves fudge, so that's an F sharp and the song's over, right? I had no automaticity with it whatsoever. But I explained to him that I thought I could hear music because I could sit at a piano, I could put on a 45, I could sit and put on a 45, play the song, and figure it out. And he listened to that and he said, you know, it's a little unusual, but I'm going to give you a listening test. And if you can pass that listening test, you can come into my class. He gave me the listening test. I passed it with flying colors, and I got one of the best grades in that class. I did better than Marcia, the piccolo player, who really didn't think I ought to be in that class because I was not in the reading music club. I was outside the reading music club culture, as it were. God bless John Hasselbeck, who opened that door for me, and because he did that, I've had a life of music. So you're probably wondering why I'm telling you all these things, and here's why. Because first and foremost, I am now a retired teacher, though I'm busier teaching than I ever have been, but I've retired from my Alaska teacher retirement system, and I want to tell you that as I sit and I reflect about my life as an educator, the only thing I really care about is, was I as good a door opener as Ms. Phelps and John Hasselbeck? That's all that really matters. The noise sort of goes away, and you do not sit and say, God, I wish I'd given one more test. I wish I had just taken No Child Left Behind a little more seriously. These are not thoughts that you have. The thing that really sticks in your heart is, did I open doors for students? Was I there? Could I hear them when they knocked on a door, on a different door? And the other thing is, I think they are banging on the door, saying, if you will just let me in with my iPad and my iPod and my mashup and my digital story, if you will just let me in with these things, I will show you what I know. But we control that door. And by and large, we are asking our students to live two lives: a digital life outside of school and a non-digital life at school. And I think we are very much at the crossroads where we actually have to take on the question and ask ourselves, do we want to be the generation of educators that say to students, okay, let's blend those two lives together, let's do it safely, responsibly, without losing any of the excitement about the things that you guys do. And in an era of bring your own device, which I absolutely assure you is coming down the pike. I mean, why wouldn't it come down the pike? Our kids look at us, we take our cell phones, our laptops, our touchpads to work, and they want to do the same thing. It's actually pretty unusual at this point to go to work and use someone else's stuff. You basically use your stuff at this point. In any event, in an era of bring your own device to school, which I absolutely assure you is right around the corner, we absolutely have to look at this and say, okay, let's look at how we want to blend your two lives. And I'm going to suggest that we brand BYOD on-off. I'm going to suggest that we tell people to bring their stuff to school and turn it on here, but turn it off here. Right now, I think we basically say, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. Well, I think we need to say, turn it on, and let's figure out what to do with it. And there are great teachers out there who do know what to do with it. And then right now, we're going to turn it off, however, because we're going to do something really odd. It's called talking to each other. And I think if we get sort of that rhythm going, in which we say, okay now, but not that it's not okay, it's just not germane to what it is we're doing at this moment, that may actually work. The bottom line is this: we have screezels. So I take screen and easel and I put it together and I get a screezel. And this is where people go to paint now. This is where it happens, particularly for the younger people. And younger at this point, for me as I approach 60, is basically anybody 25 years and younger. So this is where we go to paint now. And we have several screezels in our life. But to put this in some kind of perspective, she's on 2 screezels at once. This is nothing, right? I mean, you see this big deal. If you saw this 20 years ago in the park as you were walking home, you'd phone the cops. That's how quickly that has changed. And this is actually all part of screezel number 3, a television. Huge, huge bandwidth there to bring us stories from all over the world. And actually, this is part of Scriezel number 4, which is the big silver screen that still persists. We still love to go there because we love to have our senses overwhelmed and eat popcorn and sit with other people. It's as much a religious experience as everything else. These people like what they're seeing so much that they're illegally downloading it, but fortunately it's being picked up by a monitoring system, and that's being beamed over to Big Brother, and apparently those eyeglasses actually exist. He puts out an APB to all of his field operatives, one of whom is in an off-track betting parlor, another one's in Second Life, and there's that guy. I don't know who that is. Scriezels, they're absolutely everywhere. So when you see a screen, you need to see a place where we actually go. This is where we go to work, to play, to socialize, to learn together, to learn informally, and so on. Because the bottom line is, literacy has always meant consuming and producing the media forms of the day, whatever they are. I mean, one way to look at it is, and the derivation of the word literacy does come from the same root as letter, and it used to be just facility with letters. But it really meant consuming and producing the media forms of the day, whatever they are. It just so happens that the media forms today are the same ones that we consume. So students need to be able to write well whatever they read. This has become possible in the last 10 years. It used to be that we sat and let professional mediaists make media that we consumed. Radio, television, newspaper, all those things. That's something someone else did. That very, very small fraction of society did, and the rest of us were in the consumer pool. I don't need to tell you that's not the way it is anymore. Now with iMovie, Movie Maker, you name it, it's all out there. YouTube, it's free. We can all go out there. We can make stuff. We can park stuff. We can teach each other how to make better stuff and so on. We're now at the point where we can write what we read. And that's just in the last 10 years, unless you're really geeky, maybe the last 15 years, but this is relatively new. So the question really on the table for a lot of us is, how do you do that well? If I give college professors or teachers a paragraph and say, go ahead and assess the literacy level of this person, and I give them a, sort of ballpark, this is a freshman comp in college, or this is 9th grade in high school, and I give it to them, they will come back with relatively similar kinds of assessment. They'll say, oh, they need to do this, need to do that, and so on. There will be some differences, but basically they will hover around the same concepts of what it means to be literate. If I give them each a short documentary created by a student, not at all. It's all over the map. Some will love it, some will hate it. Very few will be able to evaluate and critique it in ways that are helpful to the student. That is because they didn't grow up with it, they don't make it, and that whole evaluation process that we've been after now in reading and writing for so long is just beginning in new media. The bottom line is this. When my teacher used to say, your homework is, I expected it to look like that. The new foundational literacy looks like that. Notice the moving picture there? We've got images, we've got color coordination, we've got navigation, we've got all sorts of buttons here, and you may click on one of these and it brings this up. But this is not the default literacy anymore. If you're a teacher, you now have a palette of options that's absolutely amazing. Most of them are free. And when we have $100 touchpads, which are right around the corner, and school boards get over the idea of kids bringing their own stuff to school, so basically you got kids who have access to free software that can make media and so on, your options just explode. And then you have to become comfortable not being the best mediaist in the room. What you have to become comfortable in is managing their talents. That's a real shift because we're used to being better writers than our students. That's how we evaluate them. Now we have to be better critical consumers than our students of media. That's really different. And of course, what's next? And you can see glimpses of this in Princess Leia appearing on a tabletop or the movie Avatar. I mean, just let your imagination go. Look for the semantic web. It's going to change absolutely everything. And Web 4.0, as they're calling it already, is the web of things, where things talk to each other and they sort of cut us out as the middlemen. So I have a tire that's down on its pressure, and it talks to part of my car, and it says, you're going to need a new tire. It looks like you got a leak. They beam that to the gas station. So my tire doesn't even consult me. And those things are coming down the pike. So what are those? And how are we going to be critical consumers of that? Here's the bottom line, and it's very, very interesting. We have 10 digital literacy action guidelines. One is the shift from tech-centrism to new media collage. I've been talking about that. But it's value writing now more than ever. Value writing. It's unbelievable what's happened. We think, oh, no, kids aren't going to write. All of my kids, all of my students, and we're talking about from age 8 to age 80, whatever they do in the world of media, they have to do a lot of writing. There's still something magical about writing. You sit, you think, you reflect. It takes a little bit of time. It's not extemporaneous. We don't want it to be. If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage, and writing is more important than it's ever been in the world of new media. And that's the irony of it. But the interesting part of that for us is that we tend to have them write to create media, and then we only evaluate the media. And we need to stop that. We need to evaluate their writing as well. I will never forget, I walked into a third grade classroom to do a digital storytelling project one time, and the teacher stopped me at the front door and she goes, oh, God, I meant to call you. My kids hate to write. And I just got to tell you that right now. I said, okay, not a problem. I walked into that classroom and I said, hi, kids. There will be no writing here. And they went, oh, we love you, be our teacher. We're going to media script, but we're not going to write. Okay, as long as you're not writing. And they wrote, and they wrote, and they wrote. And I look at that, and I see this all the time, and I say to myself, this cannot be a cognitive issue. If it were cognitive, they would not be able to write under either circumstance. This is purely inspirational and attitudinal. And the fact that they weren't doing an essay, a what, a report, a what, a media script for a TV program, they connect with that, they get that. And then slogging through the words becomes worth it to them. Oh, yes, something to sort of pause on just for a moment. We have incorporated a new form of writing I think you see on the web a lot. Here is essay form. I'm all for essay form. I write books, I write articles, but it is just one option. I suppose that's the bottom line here, isn't it? Is that we look at writing as an option, and because we don't look at it as the only default anymore, that we have options in terms of how we learn and how we express what we know, we now get to ask the question, what is writing good for? What does it do that other things don't do? And it does all those things that essays do, but we're watching this information show up in this form. This is the same information here that was over here. And look at that. And it's all because we're overwhelmed with the amount of information we have. So we use what I call the 6 Bs, boxes, bullets, breaks, banners, boldface, those things that make this what I call VDT. Sounds like a disease? It's not. It's visually differentiated text. And notice how you can sort of dive into that visually much more easily and find stuff than you can in this over here. And of course, there's writing for media, which is different, but good writing is still good writing. Digital Literacy Action Guideline number 3 is adopt art as the next R, as the 4th R. It is so obvious to me at this point that if we're in a visually aesthetic world, and it's not just visuals, it's audio, it's everything, it's a whole 9 yards. If that's where we're headed, and we're headed away from text, probably the best thing you could do for students of any age is help them cultivate their art and design skills. And here's the problem. If I say art, people go, oh, art, and they sort of see their kids' stuff tacked up on the refrigerator, and they see kids dancing in ballet class, and that's all wonderful, and that's all great. I am talking much more pragmatically than that. I am talking about being able to communicate through art and design. Because if a picture is worth 1,000 words, what is a good media collage worth? And so we need to teach those art and design skills, and they need to be as across the curriculum as reading and writing have been for the last couple of decades. That girl right there needs to be able to wield her pencil and wield Photoshop to be fully literate. And I mean fully literate in a very, very practical sense, because ultimately where we're headed is the Tao of literacy, combining art, oracy, written literacy, and digital literacy into one integrated literacy. I know no better way to do that than through media projects, but that's what we want. That is what we consume. That is what we expect. When we head out onto the web and we gather and we forage and we hunt and we gather for all the information that we use, that is what we expect to see at this point. We sit there and go, God, all this text, can't they give me a movie? I mean, that's sort of normal at this point. Look how quickly that happened. Let me show you one of my favorite examples of the Tao of literacy.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, I start the world. The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
That was done using a technology known as augmented reality, which you can get for your phone at this point. Augmented reality is coming out in all sorts of forms. You can go into stores and stand in front of a changing mirror, and then virtually what appears on the mirror are all those things that you might have to go into the changing room to try on, and that the people who work in the store are going to find wadded up on the floor, and they have to repress them and so on. So you can actually sit there and go, not that one, not that one, let's try that one. And they have it in medicine, and where they combine augmented reality with x-rays, so you're looking at someone's x-ray, and what gets piped in is sort of information about those particular bones and so on. It's just, I mean, think it and you can do it at this point. The question is, how do we use that in education, both as an input and as an output for our students, literally at any age? I mean, that to me told me more about the history of world health using a number of different literacies and a number of different media in 4 minutes than I think I could have gotten reading half a dozen books. So that's the competition here. And I don't want us to think of it as competition. Those are the opportunities. So that's a great example of when we use that kind of media. The question is, when do we use the other kinds of media, including text, for maximum input and output in education? The attitude is the aptitude. Here's what I mean about that. We have hit a really amazing point in the history of the world in which how you feel about learning in large part determines your intelligence. That's not the way it used to be. Someone wanted to know how smart I was. I can remember this as a little kid in Miss Phelps' class. They take you into a room, in walks a guy in a bow tie, doctor somebody or other. You do some things. They call your parents and say, this is how smart your kid is. I mean, there are obviously issues with that. It's out of context. It's not active. So, I mean, I don't have to tell you what the issues are with that. But now we're at the point where if you want to be truly intelligent and useful in the world, you have to love learning. Because that's the name of the game. Everything is coming at us so fast, things are changing so quickly, that you have to be able to size up situations and use what I call creatical thinking, creative and critical thinking, blend them together, sort of figure it out, and move forward to solve whatever issues it is that you have, that you're confronted with at that time. The attitude is the aptitude. If you love learning, you're in a great spot right now. As Alvin Toffler said, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Lifelong learning, it's not just a buzz phrase, it's the reality. I call it being a ninja learner. Practice personal and social literacy. Okay, another big shift here. Being literate used to be something that you did on your own. That is, I got tested. We're back to the same guy with the bow tie. Call home, your kid is this literate. That's just not the way it is anymore. We now become literate together because schools tend not to address the new emerging literacies that come out. A lot of students are just saying, okay, whatever you guys, you don't get this. We'll just head out in the web with our friends and we'll teach each other how to do good video, good digital stories, good mashups, good this, good that, because we won't address it. The bottom line is, recall the essay form I had on the left-hand side, and I had the new media collage on the right earlier. We test for the essay. We hope and pray our kids can command the new media collage when they graduate from high school, because that will give them entree into the world of digital opportunity. We're at a point where we're really, really sort of schizophrenic about this. We can't quite figure out how to marry these two things together. Develop literacy about the impacts of digital tools and about the information you consume in terms of whether it's good information. And this goes to the heart of my new book, Digital Community, Digital Citizen. That is a shameless self-promotion for that book. I'm just letting it sink in. Okay, off we go. Here's what we know. Here's what we know. Everything's going to keep changing. That's what we know. That's sort of the steady state at this point, that tomorrow will be different than today. We'll have new tools. We'll have new possibilities. And while we might want to take our old goals into those world of new tools, I'll tell you, it happens to me when I go to Home Depot. I'm walking down the aisle and I go, oh God, I didn't know one of those existed. Hey honey, you know what we could do with this? And suddenly I have a new tool which gave me a new idea. And it happens all the time. So the old concept that I have my educational goals, don't talk to me about tools, I have my educational goals regardless of the tools, and now I'll go over into my tool shop and see what I have. It doesn't work that way. I'll tell you something I used to do. I used to, when I gave a keynote speech, I used to give somebody in the front row a hammer. I mean, just an odd thing, right? Imagine you're listening to somebody who walks up to you and says, hey, would you hold on to this hammer for me? And they just look at you like, you know, if you don't feel comfortable with the hammer, then probably a good idea that I hang on to it for you. And in a couple of seconds, I would see something absolutely incredible. That person would be sitting there listening to me, and they'd start to move the hammer. And I would look at them and I'd say, I'm not picking on you, but I have to ask you, did you have a desire to hit something before I gave you the hammer? No. Then the hammer told you what to do. Oh, nobody likes that. Nobody likes being told that the technology directs them. They don't like it. But the reality is, if I give you a car, you think in terms of where you can drive. If I give you an internet connection, you think in terms of where you might go surf. And that is the relationship we have with our tools at this point. So as the new tools come, it's a convergence of what I can do and what I thought I wanted to do. So in terms of all of these things, on an average day, I have, how many people here have an iGoogle e-newspaper, maintain something like that? Oh, do it, do it. You go out and you get all these RSS feeds from all these websites, and every time they change, you can just go there, and it's all in one place, and I love it. And so I'm a real nut for finding out what the new and latest gear and apps are. I just sort of like to get sort of an idea of where we're headed culturally in terms of our tools. And once a day, I go online. I actually go like this, right? And I turn it on, and I take a drink from the fire hose. And it just never amazes me, never lets me down. We have new stuff every day. But here's one that really does change things.
We're here today to announce the first synthetic cell, a cell made by starting with the digital code in the computer, building the chromosome from 4 bottles of chemicals, assembling that chromosome in yeast, transplanting it into a recipient bacterial cell, and transforming that cell into a new bacterial species. So this is the first self-replicating species that we've had on the planet whose parent is a computer. It also is the first species to have its own website encoded in its genetic code.
No big deal, just making people. Wanted to be a little bit more athletic, but not soccer, football. Okay, we can do that. I mean, let your imagination go here. And I'm very quick to add that there are scientists out there who said, and this is now over a year old, said at that time he didn't do exactly what he said he did here, but he got very close. So I just look at that and go, okay, whether we got there or we get there a year or two from now, it's obvious this is where we're headed. And so we have stuff like that. And the reality is, or the issue before us is, where do we talk about this? I mean, how many people go home, sit around the dining room table and say, hey, you guys, what'd you do? What'd you learn in school today? Let's talk about the ramifications of making synthetic people. You wanna? I mean, it's just not something that tends to come up anywhere among our friends, at school. We're all too busy meeting standards. When do we have time to talk about this? And yet, I would suggest to you, if we're not talking about this, then we deserve the future that we will inherit, that is thrust upon us. You can be the hero of your own life story. You can be the victim of someone else's. And so towards that end, I say, what if we had, and this is part 3 of my book, what if we had an ideal school board? And this could be also a board of trustees for a university. It just doesn't make any difference at this point. What if we had an ideal school board that woke up one day and said, you know what, we didn't grow up with this stuff. We don't really know what's going on. I'm tired of just talking about bus schedules and football teams. Let's talk about how to actually shape the experience that our students have in our school district to prepare them for living in this day and age. What do you say? Let's do that. Because the reality right now is that we deal with cyberbullying, ID theft, sexting, all these things like we're playing whack-a-mole. And whack, let's get that one, whack. Okay, if we just whack this one more mole, all these things that have to do with being in cyberspace and using a lot of technology, all these things will just go away. Because we're almost at the end, right? And that's just absolutely crazy. So I say we ought to have character education for digital kids and digital adults as well. We used to have character education in school. From roughly Plato to Eisenhower, it was assumed that you would help students develop their character deliberately. Then somewhere in the 60s, we moved to sort of character clarification and values clarification. That sort of died, and we've been floundering ever since. Great programs out there, but it's no longer assumed. Well, I'll tell you, we have it now in that we have kids sign things and parents sign things that say, I promise when I go on the web, I'll be a good person. Wow, I never had to do that. I never had to declare and sign something that said I was going to be a good person, but we do that now in terms of internet use agreements. So why don't we do it deliberately? Why don't we take technology, which is largely invisible to us, and make it a deliberate area of inquiry? Imagine this as a mission statement for any organization. Students will study the personal, social, and environmental impacts of every technology and media application they use in school. It doesn't seem really outrageous, does it? Find me a school that has anything close to that. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's just not there. The bottom line is that technology connects and disconnects. Technology connects and it disconnects every time, every technology. The connections are very easy to see. They're shiny, they're helpful, it's why we buy them. The disconnections are camouflaged, happen over time. My favorite example is the microwave oven. When we bought microwave ovens, the last thing we were trying to do was obsolesce family dinner. But that's what we've done. And I'm not saying we don't have family dinner, I'm saying we don't have to. We are now technologically facilitated not to have family dinner because 5-year-olds can make dinner. And so we can all run on our own schedules, and whether that allows you to work more hours or take your kids to advanced ballet, it doesn't really make any difference. 2 years ago, my wife and I went house hunting. We looked through, 50, 60, 70 houses. It's just unbelievable. Here's what we noticed. The older homes had dining rooms. The newer homes didn't. They had feeding troughs attached to the kitchen. They had a family room, which is dedicated to people not talking to each other because the TV's on, which replaced the dining room, which is dedicated to people talking to each other. Was that caused completely by the microwave? Probably not completely, but I'll bet you it was a major contributor because we don't have to anymore. I enjoy engaging students in looking at issues of technological impact. Here's one of my favorite projects that I did. This is with 7th graders. There's me before I artificially dyed my hair gray to give myself that professorial ambiance. That is actually the first JPEG file that went up on the University of Alaska system so many years ago. And I remember looking at that saying, well, look at that right there. That, I don't know, that just looks pretty sloppy and unprofessional. So I pulled out Photoshop 2.0, and for you youngsters out there, imagine Photoshop without layers. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And that's what I did. And I'm not particularly good at this stuff. And just to give you an idea, let's do this, okay? Okay? And so I ask people, does that bother you? And they go, yeah. Say, do you think it's wrong? Well, no. It's a very interesting neurosis in which things that are not wrong bother us. But we have lots of those in the digital age. So I'm working with these students, and they came up with this idea that we would have a number in the lower right-hand corner that would give us an idea of how much something had been changed. So we're reading a magazine, we're on a website, so on. That's what we do. I think it's an absolutely fascinating concept to give us that kind of meta information, almost like the ingredients that you read on a box of cereal, so you can see what's really in there. I remember thinking at the time, you know what, that's never ever going to happen, but it's a great idea. Then 2 years ago, the French legislature decided to take up this issue, and there was a lady who, a parliamentarian who had come from the eating disorder field. She was a doctor, and she suggested that they put on, that the French government require magazines to put on a warning label, because she had sat with too many young girls who had tried to starve themselves to look like models who themselves had been so photoshopped as to be anatomically impossible. I don't know what happened to that, but that is an absolutely fabulous idea. Fluency, not literacy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that except to say the fluent are not the biggest geeks in the room. They are the people who know how to lead with technology. And then number 10 is harness both report and story, and embrace story. I do a lot of green screen storytelling, not as much as I'd like to actually. And so there is Hannah Davis. She is performing in front of a green screen. A green screen in this case is a wall that we painted green. I literally sent someone to the hardware store and said, get me a gallon of that, and that's what she's performing in front of. And then she creates her own artwork, and that's what we have at the end, and that's what goes onto the DVD. So we have her performing a story that she wrote and illustrated and performed. Do kids like this? Oh, are you kidding? Yes. I have no engagement problems. I have problems managing the engagement, but you know what? That's a great problem to have. And I also do a lot of voiceover narration. So you're seeing still images and you're listening to students talk, and think sort of Ken Burns. That's what we're looking at there. So the idea here is that they understand the media they consume by producing that media. Here's some story advice. Teachers are important. Leave the clicks and tricks to the kids with time. Deputize. Be the guide on the side, not the technician magician. Here's the deal. A lot of teachers don't want to use media in the classroom, particularly at the university level, because they're not going to be the best technician in the room. And that is the absolute last thing that you need to worry about. What you need to be able to do is look at people's media and go, okay, I can't hear your voice because the music's too loud, that didn't make any sense, so on and so forth. But we tend not to do that. We tend to give an A for anything that moves. I see it all the time. Teachers walk up to a student's screen, they see something moving, and they get those big wide eyes, and they go, wow, here's your A, and they back away from the computer. And you know what? It's just crazy. It's just crazy. We go to the movies, we come back home, we sit around the kitchen table, and we deconstruct. And we say, you know what? The special effects were over the top. God, that was cliche. That didn't make any sense. And so on and so forth. That's exactly what they need. And it has nothing to do with whether you can do what they're doing. Okay? So I hope I empower you right now to use new media in your classroom at any level, because all you need to do is be able to talk to them about what it is that they do. And also, I want to make sure that I'm clear on this point. Don't just evaluate what ends up on the screen. Evaluate their writing, their research, all of it. You have pretty much a total portfolio at the end of a media project. And it contains conventional literacy as well as emerging literacies. Okay. I'm going to tell you a story. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how story works, and I'm going to show you a few stories. Okay. This is from a novel I wrote. about the future of technology and learning. And I thought to myself, you know what, if I really believe that the meta message of the digital age is finally everyone gets to tell their own story in their own way, then I should write a story. And that's what I did. And I wrote a novel about the future of technology, learning, and business, and so on. And the protagonist, the hero in my story, is a young man named William Tell. And he, at 16, ends up being CIO of a Fortune 500 company through just a fluke of events. And it is his turn right now to this day, for the snippet that I'm telling you about, he's on stage to show a brand new web page that he has created for the company, much the way I'm on stage right now in front of you, but the people on the stage are moms and dads. This is the corporate picnic. So mom and dad and all the kids are here, and they're waiting to see this. This is the Dog and Pony Show. And by the way, if you're wondering how it was that he got his foot in the door at a Fortune 500 company at the age 16, a talent scout from that Fortune 500 company came to his high school computer science fair and watched him for his final project break into his principal's Visa card information, download it in public, and then perform a character analysis based upon his purchasing habits. And as you can imagine, he was sort of a wise guy, and he didn't really like his principal. And so his principal tried to have him thrown in jail, and the CIO said, the people from the company said, how about if we just hire him and take him out of your hair? So there he is at 16. He should have been in jail. He's got a 6-figure salary, and off he goes. So here he is. It's corporate picnic day. Mom and dad and the kids are all out there. And he's here to show them the brand new web page, and he can't get it up on the screen. Imagine this, okay? He looks up there, and all he sees is what we in the speaking business call the blue screen of death. And he is clacking away, and he just can't figure it out. He is checking chords. He is checking absolutely everything. Nothing will fix this. He is perspiring so profusely that the sweat is rolling down between his skin and his clothes, collecting in his shoes, making him slosh as he walks. He looks out into the audience, and he sees a row of adolescent young men with their baseball caps turned sideways, and they're chanting, "Loser, loser." He is about to give up when all of a sudden, up to the stage bounds little Jennifer Lewis. 12 Coke bottle glasses, pigtails. Mr. Tell, if you hit escape F12 3 times, it'll reroute through COM port 2 and come up just fine. It's a Vista thing. Now imagine the psychic tectonic plates grinding away. He's not going to let some little girl in front of all these people upstage him. So he looks down at her and says, "I'm sorry, I'm really busy right now." "Yeah, Mr. Tell, it was a patch, a Vista patch, the patch, and then, did you get this morning's patch?" "I'm a little busy right now." "Yeah, escape F12 3 times, come right up." "I'm really busy." "Do you even know where the escape key is?" "Yes, I know where the escape key is." And he looks out, and there are all these people. Now there's 2 rows. Adolescent young men, baseball cap, loser. Here's somebody in the front row go, "Well, Marge, let's go get ourselves a drink. No wonder we didn't get a bonus this year with bozos like this driving the bus." And so as he's watching people get up and leave, and he looks down at her and looks out there, he comes over some personal development line. He slays some internal dragon. He hits escape F12 3 times, and up it comes. And he thanks her. And from then on, whenever he needed help with his computer, he went to find a little girl to give him a hand. Now, there are a couple of things to walk away with from that. If I called each one of you in a month, you would all be able to tell me that story in basic terms. If I would have shown you pie graphs and quoted people from Harvard, you're going to forget it by tomorrow. That's the power of story. And I want you to think of story as a highly efficient information container. It sort of stands in contrast to lists. These are the competing containers we have right now. If I give half a group of people a card with 7 words on it in a list, and the same 7 words in a sentence, give them a few seconds to memorize it, everybody with the sentence will memorize it, almost nobody with the list will. That's the competition we have. We're looking for more and more effective ways, basically, to deal with information overload, and we reach into the distant past and pull out this thing called story, which is highly efficient in that regard. The StoryCorps is what I look for in every project that I do with kids or adults. It doesn't make any difference. I'm looking for problem, solution, and transformation. If you don't have transformation, that is, if you don't change, if your character doesn't grow, doesn't learn something, doesn't realize something, you have your average, really bad Arnold Schwarzenegger film. Bad people, shoot them. You need more than that. You need to be able to identify with somebody and go, okay, what's he going to do about that? What's he going to do about that? That's basically how that works. And in education, it's inquiry, discovery, and the transformation is learning. So am I suggesting that we can take the list format of presenting information and put it into a different format in which kids and adults might remember things better? You got it. You got it. That's exactly what I'm saying. Let me show you a really good example of one of these. But first, let me set this up a little bit. If you don't want people to zone out when they watch moving images on a screen in a classroom, I don't care what age they are, the best thing that you can do is give them a question to think about when they're watching moving images on a screen. You can actually see it in their body. They actually sort of lean forward. If you don't give them a question, they tend to lean backwards, and in their minds, their feet are up on the coffee table and they're reaching for the chips. And you don't want that. You want them intellectually engaged. So here is my question to you. Here is a 2-minute math story, of all things. What happens in this that turns this from a list into a story?
How to animate a rolling ball. First, you need an ocean. Next, you need a beach. You also need a beach ball.
To animate a ball in 3D, you have to understand your directions.
Not north, south, east, and west. For example, left and right is the x-axis. Up and down is y. In and out is z. Right now the ball is at point P on the x-axis. To move the ball from left to right, you have to increase the value of P. Let's add 6 units to the x value of P.
Oops, that doesn't work. The ball should roll as it moves.
We know that a ball rolls the length of its circumference in one rotation. To calculate the circumference of a sphere, use the formula 2 pi r.
We will use the value 3.14 for pi.
The radius of our beach ball is 10.24 inches. Doing the math, then the circumference is 64.31 inches.
That means we rotate the ball 360 degrees, and at the same time we move the ball 64.3 inches to the right.
Voila, the ball rolls.
Fourth graders. The leader on that, by the way, was Glenn Bledsoe, who's an Oregon educator and a personal hero of mine in terms of new media and kids. So what happened in that turned it from a report, from a list into a story? There was a problem. And When that ball skidded across the sand, each one of you in your own way said, I wonder what they're going to do about that. And now you are emotionally engaged in the information set. That does not happen if there isn't a problem. They didn't have to have a problem. They could have just said, here's the math. You would have forgotten it tomorrow. It's the fact that it didn't work and they had to push against something, had to struggle with something, the absolute heart and soul of a story, and overcome that somehow, and they did it by learning and applying new learning to the situation that made that work and made that memorable. It's what we call the learning process. It is the absolute antithesis of what No Child Left Behind measures. Don't get me started. Okay, we're coming up on our time. I'm going to show you just a little bit. This is a green screen project that I did. In my next session, I'll show you this entire thing.
One day, a little girl lived in Mexico, and her name was Jessica. And Jessica wanted to hear everything.
And I have to stop it there because I'm running out of time. But I'll tell you something that happened with this green screen storytelling project. The teacher came to me and said before this he could barely write sentences. Deaf kids have a hard time. They don't have all that reinforcement that we have, that audio reinforcement. The next project, he could write paragraphs. How does that happen? And I wish I had $1 million to study this because I see it all the time. When they are compelled to write something, they learn how to write.
I see.
Okay. What I'm going to talk about in the next session, if you join me, is the fact that I don't use storyboards. I use story maps. And what that means is that people have to create whatever it is they're doing in terms of those three components of the story core. You can see it right there. Sometimes I'll use the arc. And then instead of a storyboard, what I use is what I call a story table. And storyboards, I don't use them. Unless you're in professional media, I would suggest you stay away from them. They are incredibly time intensive and don't necessarily get you where you're going. And so what they do is they take their script and they put it in terms of a story. This is their script right here. And this right here is a description of the media they want to go get. It's much more efficient and it allows you to really interact with what your students are doing. And we'll talk about that more. Oh, those are my grandkids. I had to show you this. Everyone say aw. Aw. Yes, look at them. Okay, let's move on. Okay, and I'm going to go right to the end at this point. I'm not going to talk about techies and teachies because we don't have time. I'm going to give you one piece of advice. Turn concerns into goals. We've all been here. We're sitting at a table. There are 8 of you. 7 of you are on board. Oh, you're going to use wikis in history. You're going to use mini documentaries in biology. You're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. 7 out of 8 of you think this is an absolutely fantastic idea. And then there's Bob. And if your name's Bob, then there's John. And Bob has concerns, right? I have concerns. Okay. And what happens? Everything grinds to a halt. Well, you don't want to step on Bob's concerns. How insensitive would that be? So everything sort of grinds to a halt. Nothing happens. And it's so fuzzy, it's hard to know what to do next. A concern is a negatively stated goal. That's all it is. Bob, what's your concern? I'm concerned if, and I've heard this so many times, kids do all this new media and then they're not going to do enough writing. Okay, great concern. So here's the goal that comes out of that, Bob. We're going to use your writing assessment instruments to assess the writing that they do to produce the media that they produce. Now we good? Well, Bob, okay, good. Then vote. Turn it into a goal and vote. And it may be 7-1, but at least you don't make your students pay the price for your lack of innovation. Okay, let's end with this. Do I have one caution about all this digital stuff? I do. You guys, we now have video conferencing that's ubiquitous. And fortunately, there are digital makeup companies out there. Because, you know what, I love audio conferencing. I still love it. You know what I do during an audio conference? Is I put it on mute, I pump iron. Every couple of minutes, I take the mute off and I go, sounds sort of expensive to me. Thank you, Dr. Ohler, you bet. Bam, pump, pump, pump. I love it, but now we have to dress up to talk to our computer. It's just crazy. So people are actually coming up with digital makeup apps. So you can have jewelry and makeup and shaving filters. You can have feigned attention and canned laughter. You can be sitting here like this and actually look like you're going like this. You can program your computer in a video conference to be able to detect when your boss is telling a joke, and then your boss will hear you go, How does it work? Well, this is me before a video conference that I had to be on. This is after my 30th high school reunion. I had a beta piece of this software, and I thought I'd try it. I was absolutely amazed. And of course, if cost is no object, you can really reinvent your stuff. So those are the two books that I've been referring to. Please, please go tell your story. Thank you so much for listening.